That October morning in 1953, the rain was falling hard, turning the dirt road into a lumpy carpet of mud. The thick drops pelted the windshield of my 1950 Chevrolet, and the rhythmic sound of the wipers reminded me of the ticking of an impatient clock. Through the side windows, the wind stirred the tall rows of corn, bending the heavy blades and leaving that damp, earthy barnyard smell in the air. The same aroma that had lulled me to childhood on the farms of Dubuque County. The phone rang this morning, shattering the silence in the kitchen. Aaron's voice, filled with urgency, still echoed in my mind. "Daniel, I need you at the mansion, now. Nothing more. No explanation." And before I could ask, the call was cut off. When I reached the top of the hill where the Mallory mansion stood, an architectural masterpiece, it seemed almost somber under the overcast sky, its marble walls reflecting the gray light. The house, built in the late 19th century, was a mixture of pride and melancholy. Tall windows, a white columned porch, and a side tower that rose like a solitary beacon. The rain drummed on the slate roof, making a low sound that seemed to match the beat of my heart. The wrought iron gates began to open slowly, creaking as if they held ancient secrets. Beyond them, the private road was lined with red maples and golden oaks, their autumn leaves forming a carpet broken by the damp gravel. I entered the main lobby, where every detail seemed carefully chosen. The air carried a subtle scent of polished wood, mixed with the faint smell of coals burning in the fireplaces. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling like frozen waterfalls, and the hardwood floor was covered in Persian rugs, worn only at the edges, a sign of decades of respectful footsteps. There was a tension in the air, almost palpable. To the left, a grand piano sat silently, and above it were black and white photographs, pictures of harvests, prize horses, and the festivities of St. Raphael's Parish, where half the county gathered for the baptism of children. Aaron was waiting for me in his father's study. The tall windows let in a diffuse light, and the rain dripping down the glass mingled with the distant sound of a grandfather clock. He stood, hands in his pockets, staring intently at the unlit fireplace. When he turned, I saw something broken in his gaze. "Daniel," he said, his voice lower than I'd ever heard it. "My father, the doctor was here last night. He said there's not much to do. It's his heart. He's been suffering in silence for months, maybe years. Now any effort could be his last. The doctor said he doesn't have much time." I sat down slowly, absorbing those words. "I never imagined. I always thought your father was strong as a rock." "He always was," Aaron replied. "A man of few words, but with a presence that filled any room. You know well, your father and my mother used to joke that he was made of steel and stubbornness." "And how is he now?" I asked. Aaron sighed and straightened his jacket. "Fragile. The doctor asked us to avoid any bad news or any unpleasantness. His heart might not be able to handle it. That's why I needed you to come. He wants to see you. Maybe, while there's still time." I stood up and began walking toward my godfather's room. My steps, which had previously been hurried by the impulse of the news, now became soft and almost silent, as if each step carried the weight of memory. The hallway stretched ahead, long and solemn, lined with antique paintings that seemed to watch my every move. The smell of polished wood mingled with the subtle aroma of tobacco, a vivid reminder of the days when Algernon used to smoke his favorite pipe after dinner. With each door I passed, memories came flooding back. The distant echo of laughter at family dinners, the sound of glasses clinking at past celebrations, and Algernon's firm voice offering advice, always with that tone that brooked no argument but carried respect. I took a deep breath. Suddenly, the mansion seemed quieter than ever. Even the rain, which had previously drummed heavily on the windows, sounded muffled, as if it, too, respected this moment. My hands brushed the carved wood of the bedroom door. It was imposing, but now it represented a symbolic barrier, the separation between the strong man I knew and the fragility I feared I would encounter. Before turning the handle, I closed my eyes for a moment. "Go ahead, Daniel," I muttered to myself. Then I pushed the door open carefully, letting the soft creak announce my entrance. I took a deep breath and approached the bed. There, lying, lay a man who had once been as imposing as the iron that shaped his reputation, but now seemed fragile, brittle, as if time had drained all the strength from him. Algernon slowly moved his head to the side, his blue eyes, still steady despite his illness, fixed on me. A faint, almost imperceptible smile appeared on his dry lips. "Daniel, you came," he said, his voice hoarse and slow. I sat beside his bed and held his hand. The skin that had once been thick and firm, marked by years of work and discipline, was now thin, almost transparent. The touch made my chest tighten. "Of course I came. Aaron called me. Said you needed to see me." "Yes, I do. I no longer have the strength I used to, but certain presences bring peace. You've always been like family to me. You've always been with us in every important moment. My father, my mother, always respected you like a brother. Your father is a man of honor. Never forget that. It was at his side that I learned that the earth only responds to those who treat it truthfully, and that a man's word is worth more than any contract. I remember hearing you say that during the 1948 harvest. You spoke to the workers as if they were part of your own family. Because they were, all of them. The farm is only fertile when hands and hearts work together. It's the same with life, Daniel. It's the same with faith." He took a deep breath and added, "There is so much I still want to teach, but time is a commodity that not even I can buy." "You have already taught me much more than you can imagine," I replied. He gave a tired smile, almost invisible, but full of tenderness. "Go now. I don't want you to see me like this for long. I'd rather you remember me as I always was, standing strong, looking ahead." I hesitated. I didn't want to go, but I knew he was right. I leaned in slowly, rested my forehead on his hand, and closed my eyes for a moment. No words were spoken, but that gesture contained all the gratitude and love I'd never been able to express aloud. I stood up and walked to the door, trying to convince myself that this wouldn't be the last time, that I would see him again, sitting on the porch, his expression firm, like on my childhood visits. I remembered afternoons spent running through the hallways of that house, his laughter echoing like a reassurance that everything would always be okay. I clung to those memories like someone holding onto a rope in the dark, trying to convince myself that there was still time. I descended the stairs slowly, each step echoing as if the entire mansion were breathing with me. When I reached the lobby, Aaron was already there, standing at the foot of the stairs. His rigid posture contrasted with his weary gaze, as if he were trying to hold the weight of it all alone. "So?" he asked in a low, almost hesitant tone. "He still has a strength inside him, but I know it won't be for long," I replied, trying to hide the emotion that insisted on betraying me. Aaron nodded silently, his eyes flicking briefly to the tall windows, where the rain still streaked the glass. It was as if he didn't want to look me in the eye, perhaps fearing that any exchange of glances would open the door to a pain he couldn't contain. "Thank you for coming, Daniel," he said finally. His voice was firm, but I could hear the vulnerability hidden behind those words. "I couldn't be anywhere else," I replied, and it was the absolute truth. There was a pause. We stood there, facing each other, like two men caught between the painful present and the memories of a simpler past. For a moment I felt like hugging him, but I only squeezed his hand. It was enough to convey what didn't need to be said. As I turned to leave, the sound of my footsteps echoed through the silent hall. The heavy door opened before me, and the cold, damp morning air enveloped me. As I stepped through the mansion's gates, I felt as if I were leaving not just a home, but a part of my own history behind. On the way home, a sudden thought made me change direction. I turned left, leaving the main road behind, and headed to my Uncle Joseph's house. That place, with its wooden porch always creaking at the slightest step, held a familiarity almost as old as my childhood memories. He was there, sitting in his rocking chair, a cup of coffee cooling beside him, as if time had its own rhythm for him. As soon as I parked, Joseph looked up, his tired but still alert eyes on me, and greeted me with a small smile. "Well, if it isn't Daniel," he said, slapping his hand on the arm of the chair. "What did the wind blow in here?" I walked up the porch steps slowly, the smell of old wood and tobacco permeating the air. I sighed before answering. I was returning from a visit to my godfather's house. He's not in good health. Joseph stared at me for a moment, as if weighing each word before blurting out his answer. From your father's house? The sentence struck me like a bolt from the blue. I raised my eyebrows in confusion. No, I hesitated, trying to correct myself. From my godfather's house, Algernon. My uncle didn't blink. He just nodded firmly and repeated with disconcerting calm, So, from your father's house. The silence that followed was suffocating, but I couldn't find the words to respond. Something inside me wanted to insist, to ask, to demand an explanation, but my mind was so scrambled that I simply remained silent. Joseph changed the subject as if nothing had happened. He asked about work, mentioned the corn that was ready for harvest, and complained about the pain in his knee from the change in weather. I heard him, but I could barely pay attention. The weight of that sentence echoed inside me, growing louder and louder. From your father's house. I glanced at my watch, eager for an excuse to leave. I hurriedly got up, telling him I had early appointments the next day. He didn't seem surprised. He simply waved, his eyes narrowed in something that sounded more like a riddle than a farewell. I walked down the porch steps and, once inside the car, felt my chest tighten. I started the engine and let the dust from the road swallow the house behind me. I tried to ignore my uncle's words that afternoon. As strange as they sounded, I simply didn't see any sense in them. Maybe it was his advanced age, maybe a memory snafu, nothing more. I didn't want to delve into them myself. Besides, there was something bigger occupying my thoughts. My wedding. I was only in my 20s, and the days seemed to be racing toward the altar. Claire, with her serene smile and lively eyes, managed to dispel any shadows that might try to creep in. Between visits to the tailor, invitations that needed to be delivered, and meetings with her family to discuss details of the ceremony, Uncle Joseph's comment soon dissipated like smoke in the wind. Life was pulling me forward, and I let myself go, believing that the future was just around the corner, within my reach. The wedding was everything Claire had dreamed of, despite its simplicity, perhaps because of it. The ceremony took place in the town church, with the windows open, letting in the humid October air, scented with dry leaves and whispers of distant rain. Claire entered the church holding a simple yet beautiful bouquet in a way that's hard to explain. White daisies, freshly picked from her mother's garden that morning, mingled with tiny roses, blooming shyly among the green leaves, her face flushed beneath her veil. When we exchanged vows, I could barely keep my voice steady. She squeezed my hand, as if pulling me back to the present. It was like that for me, always has been. On the way out, she threw the bouquet, and for a moment everything around me was just laughter, lightness, and the simple glow of happiness you feel when you know you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Over the next few days, I began to get used to the idea of a new life. We tidied up the house with what we had. Every object had a story. The smell of coffee in the morning took on a new meaning, as if even the rhythm of time inside the house had changed. It was a Thursday morning, almost a week after the wedding, when Erin showed up at home. Claire opened the door, and I noticed a certain wariness in the way she looked at me, as if she already suspected what was coming. Erin stood in the doorway, saying nothing at first. From his tired face, I could tell. He approached, took a deep breath, and spoke softly. He left last night, Danny. It was calm. He didn't suffer. I stood still for a while, unsure of what to feel. Algernon was an important presence in my life. I felt a subtle emptiness, the memory of some conversations and the time spent in his house since childhood. Claire stayed by my side. I didn't cry, just remained quiet, thinking about everything that was left behind and how much life goes on, even when we're not ready. Claire supported me, and so did Erin. We went together to prepare the details for the wake at the mansion, as he had wanted. No ceremony, just a few friends and family. I walked across the wet lawn, seeing the autumn leaves already scattered around the house. Only then did I understand that certain absences fill more than presence ever could, and that the most valuable legacy anyone can leave behind are the spaces of silence that each of us fills with what we have learned to feel. We returned home that night. Claire made tea. We sat in silence for a while, hands clasped together on the table, learning together what it truly means to start over. And after that day, life found its way forward. We learned to live with Algernon's absence, just as we had learned to live with so many other absences that time imposes. The children arrived one after another, filling the house with noise, laughter, and also worries. The sound of small footsteps in the hallways became the music of our youth. Claire always had a gift for transforming the simple into memories. An embroidered towel, a loaf of bread taken from the oven, a song hummed in the backyard. Everything about her seemed to capture the moment, as if she knew time was fleeting. The boys grew up, became young men, then grown men and women, each following their own path. The house grew quieter and we, more filled with stories. The years passed like the seasons, some laden with storms, others with calm summers, but always together, side by side. Until one day I realized we no longer walked in the rush of beginnings, but with the calm pace of those who have learned to grow old together. Time doesn't warn you when it starts weighing on your shoulders. Only one day do we wake up and realize the years have passed, and passed quickly. Claire and I had been together for almost half a century when the signs began to appear. Small lapses in memory, then bigger confusions. At first I told myself it was just a matter of getting older, that it would soon pass, but it didn't. The doctor said the word I'd avoided for months, Alzheimer's. Suddenly everything we'd built, every cherished memory was threatened. I saw in her eyes the struggle to hold on to the thread of the simplest things, the names of the flowers in the garden, and even my own face at times seemed to slip away. And I, now in my 70s, with my hands worn by time, tried to be an anchor. But it wasn't enough. The treatment was expensive, far beyond our means. On those long nights when Claire fell asleep before me, the house seemed suspended in silence. And it was in that silence that an old memory returned to me, almost like a whisper from another time, the voice of Joseph, my uncle, repeating those words I had buried in oblivion. So, from your father's house, why was it coming back now? I'd spent decades ignoring it, like someone pushing away an uncomfortable dream. But given Claire's fragility, that memory no longer seemed like a mere daydream. If it were true, if Algernon had really been my father, perhaps there would still be something I had, an inheritance, a right, a chance. Not for me, but for her. And for the first time in so many years, doubt became a necessity. The next day, I summoned my courage. I put on my worn coat, grabbed my car keys, and walked slowly to the garage. The engine was slow to respond, as if it too was enduring the journey. My hands on the steering wheel trembled, and for a moment I considered giving up. But the memory of Claire, so fragile in the next room, made me turn the key again and move on. The drive to Aaron's house felt longer than it actually was. The cold wind blew through the cracks in the window, and every mile I traveled increased the weight of what I was about to say. What if it's a mistake, I thought. Doubt gnawed at me. Would it really be fair to bring this up now? But then I thought about Claire. I thought about her fragility, about the treatment we couldn't afford. When I finally parked in front of the large property, I stood there for a few moments, staring at the imposing facade. The contrast with my own life had always been painful, but never more so than now. I took a deep breath, got out of the car, walked to the door and knocked. The hollow sound of metal against wood echoed in my chest, and soon I heard heavy footsteps approaching. The latch turned, and Aaron appeared before me, serious as ever. "Daniel," he said, his voice deep, "what brings you here at this hour? I need to talk to you. It's important." He made room and I entered. The room was dim, smelling of old wood and the wine he loved so much. We stood face to face, like two strangers forced to share the same air. The years passed, and we were no longer as close as before. "Aaron," I began, hesitating. "I know it may sound absurd, but I need to ask you something. It's about your father." His eyes narrowed. "What's wrong with my father?" "Some say that he might also have been my father." For a moment the silence was heavy. The crackling of the fireplace seemed to be the only living sound in the room. Then Aaron stepped forward, his face hard, and almost spat the words. "Who do you think you are, Daniel? Did you seriously come here in the middle of the night after all these years, looking for my father's inheritance?" His voice echoed like suppressed thunder. The dry sound of wood on the floor made my hands tremble. My father was a man of integrity, he said, his finger pointing, and I will not allow you to come here after all these years to stain his memory with this absurd bastard story. Aaron, I don't mean to tarnish anything, I replied, trying to remain calm, but my voice failed me. I just, I just need to know the truth. Not for myself, for Claire. Don't get things mixed up, Daniel. You are my father's poor godson, not his son. He shook his head disapprovingly. He walked to the window and flung open the curtains. He stood with his back to me, breathing deeply, trying to compose himself. My father's memory will not be ruined by a belated doubt, he said without looking back. And if you have any dignity, never bring up this subject again. My heart was pounding like a locomotive. Shame burned my face, but my legs simply wouldn't respond. I wanted to turn around and walk away, but it felt like the ground held me there, facing Aaron's harsh judgment. My dry throat prevented me from saying another word. Everything inside me screamed for me to run. Finally, I gathered what little dignity I had left, took a deep breath, and walked slowly to the door. I didn't say goodbye. I just opened it, feeling the night chill hit my chest like a punch. Behind me, Aaron's silence was crueler than his words. In the car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely put the key in the ignition. The humiliation was overwhelming, but even more painful was the nagging thought. What if he's right? What if I never know the truth and have no other way to pay for Claire's treatment? Am I greedy? I felt guilty about my thoughts, and I began to question my character. His words echoed, poor godson, bastard. I felt as if I had betrayed Algernon's memory, my parents, and worst of all, myself. I gripped the steering wheel tightly until my knuckles turned white, trying to silence that voice inside me that said, "You just wanted money, Daniel." But amidst the confusion, another memory surfaced. Claire's lost gaze, wondering about the mother she'd forgotten had been gone decades. The emptiness in her eyes was far greater than the weight of my shame. I took a deep breath, swallowed the tears that threatened to come, and kept driving. I didn't know if I'd done the right thing or if I'd crossed a line of no return. I only knew one thing. Claire deserved me to try, even if the whole world judged me for it. Lying in bed, he stared at the dark ceiling, as if searching for answers written there. The silence in the house seemed denser than ever, broken only by the soft creak of the ancient wood. I found myself thinking that if there was even a chance, I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was ready to face answers, even if it hurt. But a restlessness throbbed within me. How far was it worth pursuing? For years, I'd ignored questions that had been kept hidden, letting time erase my doubts. But now something different was pushing me forward, a strength I didn't even know I possessed. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was hope, maybe it was just the weight of time that no longer allows me to postpone choices. I closed my eyes slowly, as if making a pact with myself. I knew that come dawn, I could no longer retreat. In the morning, with a heavy heart but a sense of urgency, I began searching for a lawyer willing to help me. I scheduled an appointment with a wills attorney in the city. The chosen one was Samuel Carter, who had a reputation for being direct and fair, someone who didn't mince words. He was known for taking on difficult cases, and many said he had a special flair for finding loopholes where no one else would. I felt I could trust him. On the appointed day, as I entered his office, the smell of antique leather and neatly filed papers warmed my soul. I settled into my chair and explained everything in a restrained manner, and he listened attentively. Then I did the inevitable. I told him I needed his services but didn't have the money to pay him. "I have to be honest, Mr. Carter. I can't afford this lawsuit right now. Everything that comes in goes toward my wife's medication." He just nodded as if he had already foreseen it. "Let's do it differently. Contingency fees." I frowned. "And that means a wafi which I only receive if we win. My share will come from the inheritance you are entitled to. Nothing from your pocket now. So if I lose, I'll take you with me." He smiled slightly but seriously in his eyes. "It's a risk I only accept because I believe in your case. But Daniel, this kind of agreement also means something else. I'll fight with everything I have, because your victory is my victory. So with that part out of the way, he began to explain to me. In inheritance cases, what matters to the law is not whether the parents were married, but whether there is a legally established paternity bond. Whether your father, Algernon, recognized you while he was alive, or whether we can prove that with a DNA test or witnesses who saw him treat you as a son, you may be entitled to a share of the inheritance, like any legitimate child. I left the office with my mind spinning faster than the hands of a grandfather clock. The lawyer's words echoed within me, heavy and yet hopeful. Proof. That was the key. But how? Algernon and Uncle Joseph were no longer alive, and Aaron had made it clear he wouldn't lift a finger to help me. Inside the car, I stood there for a few minutes, staring at the steering wheel, as if it could give me direction. There was no easy way out. I would need to sift through memories, sift through documents, talk to people who might have already buried their own memories. But one thing was certain. If there was a thread of truth hidden in the past, I needed to pull it out. That night, I tossed and turned in bed without sleeping. The lawyer had been clear. Without a document, without recognition while alive, the most direct route would be genetic testing, and that meant resorting to the impossible, exhuming the body of Algernon, my godfather. The next day, I returned to the office. Mr. Carter greeted me with the same patient expression, but I couldn't hide the urgency in my voice. What if we request an exhumation? I blurted, barely breathing. He clasped his hands on the table. Exhumation is possible, Daniel, but it's not simple. In the United States, this procedure can only be authorized by a court. Legal and legitimate reasons must be presented, such as an inheritance dispute or a criminal investigation. Furthermore, the immediate family must be notified and can contest the request. My heart raced. But if I have solid reasons, can the judge allow it? You can, but be prepared. Aaron will be informed, and if he objects, the battle will be fierce. I left with a mixture of fear and determination. For the first time, I saw a possible light, albeit a distant one, but I knew it wouldn't be long before the news reached the wrong ears. 2 days later, the phone rang early in the morning. It was Mr. Carter. Daniel, I filed a lawsuit for determination of heirs in the Dubuque County Court, an incidental request for exhumation exclusively for the collection of genetic samples. An exhumation for this purpose requires court order, and it needs to be supervised by funeral director. The rule also mandates notification of whoever, by law, has the right to control the disposition of the remains, in this case, the next of kin in the order of priority under Statute 144C. That is Aaron. He explained everything calmly, like someone building a fence post by post. And the chances? I asked. Well, as long as there's a good cause, DNA relevance, technical, protocol, respect for the family. Our package covers all of that. Just be prepared for Aaron's resistance. I agreed, knowing I had no options. After the call, I spent the rest of the day in the garden, mowing the lawn, operating on autopilot, as if my body knew how to work while my mind waited. Weeks passed, and one day, like an unexpected visitor, the phone rang. Mr. Carter, the lawyer's voice, was shorter, thick with tension. They scored summary hearing for next week. The notary's office required proof of notification to Aaron. Let's do it today. I thanked him, and for a moment I thought that, finally, a door was opening. But days later, the phone rang again. The silence on the other end froze me before the words could be said. Daniel, Aaron moved before our hearing. He came in with emergency requests down, disinterment and cremation of the remains of the father for reasons of final disposition and maintenance of the tomb. The judge granted court order, requirement for this type of exhumation with cremation. The forensic doctor has already issued the declaration of death by natural causes, which is also required. A funeral director supervised. They did everything this morning. I was speechless. I felt the room shrink, as if the air had been siphoned out. Listen, his voice returned, lower, almost too heavy to speak. It's not over. DNA from ashes is practically unviable, yes, but we have other options. We'll request a sibling test from Aaron, and if he refuses, we'll look for Algernon's collateral relatives, brothers, uncles, cousins. We can also try old clinical samples, paraffin-embedded biopsy slides, hospital records, even preserved teeth. The words brotherhood with Aaron pierced me like a cold knife. It was like asking him to look at me and admit the blood that ran through our veins, the very thing he denied most. I took a deep breath. But remember, Daniel, he added, even with DNA, the law requires more. We need to show that there was recognition in life. Testimonies, letters, records. We'll work on both tracks, biological and social. I held the phone to my ear for a long time, without saying anything. Then I thanked him and hung up. I got in the car and drove aimlessly along roads I knew with my eyes closed. The world looked the same. The maple trees already red-tipped, the pastures worn from late summer. Inside, everything had changed. It wasn't just the possibility of money. It was the right to know. Ever since I learned Aaron had cremated our father's body, something inside me died too. It was as if my last chance to prove myself had gone up in smoke along with the ashes. Samuel Carter stood firm, reminding me there was still a way forward. But I was crumbling inside. I didn't give up because Claire needed me, and because Carter believed in me, even when I no longer did. That morning, the doorbell rang and shook me from my stupor. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I could hardly believe it. Aaron was there, impeccably dressed, with that air of superiority I knew so well. My heart raced. For a moment, I thought he'd come to offer a truce, but one look into his eyes was enough to tell me otherwise. Still, I couldn't close the door. Curiosity got the better of me. I motioned for him to come in. He walked in like he owned the place. As soon as he sat down, he pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. "Do you mind?" he asked, but didn't wait for my answer. He lit one, took a deep drag, and let the smoke spread around the room, as if he wanted to mark his territory. "I'll be blunt," he said, opening an elegant folder. "Your lawyer called me. It seems you're feeling hopeful." I didn't answer. I just stared at him. He took an envelope out of his briefcase and placed it on the table. "There's a sum of money in here. It's not much compared to what you've been dreaming of receiving, but it's enough to solve your immediate problems." I took a deep breath. "Small compared to what I'm entitled to, you meant." Aaron laughed, that short, disdainful laugh. "Right? You have nothing. You'll just waste time and energy. In the end, there won't even be any dust left for you. This envelope is your only chance of getting something out of it." My hands trembled under the table. I knew that money could pay for Claire's medication for months, but accepting it would mean giving up everything. It would be betraying Carter. It would be erasing my father's memory with the same carelessness with which Aaron had his body burned. I looked at him hard. "No." He raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Are you sure? I don't usually make second offers." I got up and opened the door. "Then save your money. I'll fight." For a few seconds, he just stared at me. Then he put the envelope back in his briefcase and straightened his jacket. When he finally got up to leave, he threw his cigarette on the living room floor and crushed it with the toe of his shoe like a cockroach, a brusque, automatic gesture that left a trail of ash scattered over his foot. "Think about it, Danny," in a cynical tone. "That's the best you're going to get," he said, and left without looking back. I closed the door slowly. My legs were wobbly, but something inside me flared. I had refused the temptation of immediate relief. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was resisting. I sat down. I sat there motionless, as if the silence of the room could swallow me. Aaron's visit left a bitter taste in my mouth, as if I'd swallowed something rotten that insisted on remaining stuck in my throat. I didn't want to admit it, but part of me still carried memories of when he and I were just two kids sharing secrets, dreams, and even laughter. That bond, fragile but real, was now in ruins. All that remained was a war, and not for honor, not for affection, but for money. Ah, money. Always money. Like a shadow that infiltrates every crack, destroying homes, breaking bonds, corrupting even what seemed pure. I sank onto the couch, my eyes fixed on nothing. My mind wandered between memories and disappointments when something snapped me out of my stupor. Right in front of me lay the cigarette butt Aaron had crushed against the living room floor. For a moment, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was just a charred remnant of tobacco, But at the same time, it was so much more than that. In that split second, I realized what his pride and arrogance had left behind. A test, a possibility that could change the course of everything. I felt a shiver run down my spine, not from fear, but from a sudden spark of hope. I reached out carefully as if handling a rare artifact, and picked it up. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed one of those Ziploc bags, and with a trembling hand, put what might be the missing piece inside. My heart was beating fast. My breath was shallow. My mind was in turmoil. I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Carter's number. He answered on the third ring, his voice as calm as ever. "Carter." My voice almost broke. I took a deep breath. "I think I have something." A brief silence on the other end of the line. "Something?" he asked with that cautious tone of someone who already senses something. "Aaron left a cigarette here at home. It's intact, with the filter. I saved it." This time the silence lasted a little longer. Then I heard his breathing and a firm answer. "Daniel, don't do anything. Don't touch that again. I'll take care of it personally." I hung up the phone, my hand still trembling. I looked again at the transparent bag on the table. That small, unremarkable cigarette butt seemed to radiate a strange power. I no longer knew if it was luck, destiny, or divine irony, but one thing was certain. The war was not yet lost. The following days were spent waiting. Carter acted quickly. He packed the evidence, contacted the lab, and officially requested the DNA test. I, on the other hand, felt like a prisoner counting the hours. Each night was a battle against my thoughts, each morning a burden of anxiety. The weight became an uncomfortable mirror. I saw myself reflected in what I'd always avoided facing: my dependence on the outcome, the bitterness of Aaron's betrayal, and the feeling that my worth was hanging on a piece of paper. When the day finally arrived, Carter called me early. "Daniel, the results are in. I want you to come to the office." I crossed the city, and upon entering the room I saw the envelope on his desk. It was simple, ordinary, and yet carried a weight that could crush a man. "Are you ready to listen?" he asked. I nodded. There was no turning back. He opened the envelope slowly, read silently for a few seconds that seemed like an eternity. Then he looked up and said, "It's compatible. 100%. You're a legitimate son." The words crashed over me like a wave that first knocks me down, then lifts me up. I wanted to scream, laugh, cry, but I remained silent. I just closed my eyes and let a tear fall. It wasn't just victory, it was justice. Aaron, of course, wouldn't be long in contesting. I knew a legal battle was yet to come, but deep inside me, something had already come to an end. Because this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about identity, roots, dignity. Later back home, Claire slept peacefully on the couch. I looked at her and realized that all that effort hadn't been about money. It never had been. It was about her, about me, about us, so that her life wouldn't be tainted by the same emptiness I'd carried for years. And there, alone in the dim light of the room, I understood a lesson that perhaps my whole life had been trying to teach me. Money can build walls, but truth is the only foundation that stands the test of time. When the DNA results were officially presented to the court, there was no longer any room for doubt. Mr. Carter firmly and clearly supported my defense, and Aaron, even with his usual arrogance, was unable to overturn the evidence. For the first time, I saw the pride on his face melt in the face of the truth. A few weeks later, the judge handed down the final decision. I was recognized as the legitimate heir. The inheritance, which had seemed like an unattainable dream, was now in my hands. And it wasn't just about assets or property. It was the recognition of my identity, something that had been denied me for so long. As I left the courthouse, the air felt less heavy on my shoulders. Carter greeted me with a firm handshake and a look of quiet satisfaction. Claire ran to hug me, and in that gesture, I knew it had all been worth it. That night, after everything, I went out into the backyard. I sat on the old wooden chair, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath. The sky was clear, dotted with stars like tiny glowing embers. Silence brought me back to my earliest memories. I thought of my mother. I remembered how much I respected her, the silence I maintained out of respect, the questions I never asked. That's why I never had the courage to ask back then about what Uncle Joseph had insinuated about my origins. It was a different time. Children carried respect and shame in equal measure. And above all, I didn't want to tarnish the image I had of her. I also remembered the man I always called father. Hardworking, soft-spoken, a silent example of dignity. Deep down, I never wanted that memory to be altered. I loved him just the way he was, without needing proof or explanations. Now, with the truth exposed and justice served, I realize that no inheritance is worth anything unless it is accompanied by memory, respect, and love. Money may change hands, but what we silently inherit, the values, the honor, the memories, remains with us until the end. And perhaps this is the greatest victory of all. Not only having achieved what was rightfully mine, but understanding that my roots were always there, firm, even when life tried to convince me otherwise. And so, under the silence of the stars, I closed a cycle. Not only with the justice of men, but with the peace I finally found within myself.